Dean Hall spent 33 years as a therapist, sitting across from other people's grief. And then life handed him his own. His first wife died of a brain tumor. Not long after, he was diagnosed with leukemia and then a lymphoma on top of it. Most people at that point brace for the fight. Dean did something stranger. He decided he needed a purpose he was passionate enough about that he'd be willing to die trying to reach. And the purpose he found was to swim 187 miles down a cold Oregon river. He wasn't doing it to cure anything. He was doing it because the 40-degree water was the one place his grief could finally move through him. 22 days later, he'd finished, the first active cancer patient ever to swim the whole Willamette. And when they drew his blood, the leukemia was gone. Undetectable. Nobody can fully explain it. And Dean is the first to tell you he's a story of one, not a formula. But what draws me to him isn't the vanishing cancer. It's what he changed to get there. Not a drug, not a protocol, the conditions. The cold, the water, the wildness, the reason to keep living. Here's my conversation with Dean Hall. I'm Dr. Nasha, and this is Tend the Terrain, where we stop drowning in information long enough to recognize we're starving for something much deeper. Health doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in a terrain. The biology, the rhythms, the relationships, the meaning you're still making. All of it shapes whether life expresses as vitality or quietly begins to unravel. And each week, I sit down with scientists, physicians, farmers, artists, patients, and systems thinkers, people who talk about bodies, but also about land, about healing, but also about grief and belonging, and what it means to become human again. This isn't a show for quick answers. It's a space for better questions. Pull up a chair. Wow. I've been looking forward to this conversation for weeks now. And for our listeners, you and I, the end of or middle of, somewhere in June, feels like an eternity ago, got to meet in person for the first time. And when Dr. Tom Seeger and his Cold Plunge Research Institute conference was happening in Tempe, Arizona, in June of 2026, I was looking at the roster because, I knew I was speaking, but I was curious who else was there. And as soon as I saw your name, I recognized your name immediately. And I said, oh my God, is this the guy? The guy who swam?
Guy.
And the guy. And I went immediately and clicked the link. And I was so excited. I told Steve that, I love Ben Bickman. I've been at multiple conferences and, some of these other folks that were on there were like, oh yeah, but the one I was most excited to be with, and forgive me for any of the folks that were there who are hearing this later, was you. Because your story is so compelling. And we meeting each other, I think I came up to you and talked about what a fangirl I was of you. And you flipped the narrative onto me, young man, which was such a surprise and such a joy and
I
such
think
an
you
honor.
just flipped the narrative on my life. I can't remember the last time someone called me young man.
Hey,
But
you know
no,
I'm a Benjamin Button.
I couldn't wait. And then when I heard you were there, I was like, "Oh, okay, I gotta go." And then when you were so gracious to say that to me, I was so worried, and I had talked myself down. Dean, censor yourself. She doesn't know you. Don't be overly familiar. Don't tell her you've got a crush on her and her work. Kind of just slow down, buddy. And then you said that, and I thought, oh, what a wonderful human being.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. And then we were talking right before the recording hit that seemed all well and good until then my husband, I introduced you to him. And then, as I said, I was chopped liver after that because the two of you bonded so beautifully. It was so endearing to watch. I was enthralled to watch the interaction between the two of you.
Oh, he's just, and that makes you even more special. to see the love and the long-term relationship that has developed between you so sweetly through decades and through all of your traumatic events, and I'm sure his as well. And to see the closeness and the shine in his eyes when he looks at you even.
Oh,
That just did this old marriage therapist a world of good. But I blurted out early. I don't know if you remember that Steve and I were twins separated at birth. But then talking to him, I found out how abjectly brilliant he is. And I thought, okay, let him be the smart twin.
you said we have to have like a Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Is that what
Yeah, I'm definitely
we're
Tweedledum.
it? Well, it is absolutely not true. And anyone who's read your book and who's going to hear this conversation is going to learn the brilliance of who you are. And so I'm
Thank you.
so excited about this conversation because you said you didn't get in the water to cure anything, that you
No,
got in because you were lost, because you lost someone very, very, very precious to you, your wife.
right, right.
And then shortly thereafter, you were handed your own diagnosis, your own sort of opportunity to get out of jail free card. And yet your purpose to stay, part of this is your daughter, which I love that you share that story throughout your book and on stages. But your purpose, you knew you needed a purpose so big that you'd be willing to die trying to reach it. So
Right.
take us back to that version of you standing at the edge of the river before you that very first stroke. What were you actually looking for, Dean, at that time?
I was just primarily looking to inspire other cancer patients
Mm.
to be inspired to refuse to be defined by their diagnosis. And if they saw this guy who had two forms of cancer and was 54, who'd never swum a river, uh, swim 187 miles at that time, I was hoping successfully, that it would inspire them to be able to face whatever challenge they had, to know that even though we're cancer patients and you're living proof of this, and you were at so much a younger age and time in life, that inspires me. But as you well know, when you're handed that diagnosis and then you have losses along the way, or maybe even before, and that's the reason you're diagnosed, uh, it's so hard to have any sense of identity left. And so pretty soon that diagnosis starts to define who you are, who you become. And I think when we let it happen that way, if we don't hold on to the reins of our identity and let it be skewed toward just cancer patient or pathetic person who's sick trying to live, then it's kind of downhill from there.
Ooh, ooh, so potent. You describe this sort of 40-degree initiation, this 40-degree water as a very meditative state. And so you talk about this, and I just it's so beautiful how you speak to this as a place where grief could finally move through you. And that's very, very different than you like jumping in for the athletic chasing the athlete chasing a record. So what was actually happening in you in that cold that was not happening
Yeah.
on dry, warm land?
After the first 3 minutes of, oh shit, it's cold,
Yeah.
that would happen 8 to 10 times a day because it was so cold. And people who don't know cold, they hear 42 degrees and they think of the weather and they're like, oh, that's not so bad. I can even go without a coat. But when you're immersed in moving water that's 42 degrees and your face is in it, it's so frighteningly cold. Even though I was wearing a 3 mil triathlete's wetsuit, I would go into thrombosis, or what I call deep core throttle, where I could feel my internal organs banging against my rib cage about every 45 minutes. And so I'd have to get out after 45 minutes of swimming. I'd get out, stand on the riverbank, run in place, do jumping jacks until my body would start to warm from the inside out,
Wow.
and then talk myself into getting back in. And I was
Now
doing that
there's
8 to 10
a
times a day. Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah.
8
And so the
and
meditative state really didn't start, even though I'd been meditating by that time for 14 years, about an hour a day.
wow.
I'd made a commitment in 2000 to meditate an hour a day, mostly mindfulness meditation. And so I was very used to having a meditative practice. And it wasn't until I really kind of got used to what I call dancing with the river, because when you're in a river and it's got a flow to it, it's pushing you and moving you. It's not like swimming in a pool at all, because not only are you moving like this, but you're moving up and down and around. You got to kind of learn how to partner with it. And that takes days, if not weeks. But within about 3 or 4 days, because I'd done so many practice swims within the 6 months earlier, that I got into that dance, into that partnership. And it was this beautiful flow that I'd never achieved in regular meditation.
Wow.
Uh, yeah, because it was pretty much sensory deprivation, plus at the same time this curious exact opposite of sensory overload, because I'm getting all these colors. The water was so clear, I could see the rocks on the bottom. I could see fish. I could see uh, uh, Douglas fir flying by, blue sky. I could see water refracting in, or light refracting in the water as it moved. So it was, it was so otherworldly.
That was the
Yeah.
phrase that came to mind as you described it. I'm like, that's just otherworldly. And I mean, my gosh, I mean, there's so much to unpack here. That's why like the book is so powerful to read
Mhm.
here. But one thing I think that you do a great job about, because a lot of people will read this and think, well, man, after 22 days and 187 miles and a natural spring fed, very freaking cold water, river, your leukemia tests came back undetectable. And so you have
Yeah.
been really good about saying, this isn't like, hey, everybody, that's your treatment of choice here. You really push back against that headline of cold water cures cancer. And you really push back on that to really express that this was your N of one. So, what I think is really what I want you to pull forth here for everybody is that how do I want to say this? Because I've really thought about this here. What changed in you? What do you believe? Because we also have evidence, by the way, as to what happened, but I want to know what you believe in your own body and being changed in you and around you that summer that you think your body was responding to.
Well, I had been raised, I tell everyone I was raised by wolves. Both
I love this.
both
Yes.
my mother and my father were mountain climbers here in Oregon. And this was back, I'm so old, this was back in the 60s and early 70s, when Oregon was still, I mean, it's still very wild and beautiful, but back then you get 2 or 3 days out on a trail, we wouldn't see anyone. And we'd get to these pristine alpine lakes and climb these mountains as a family, sometimes with a mountaineering group, but many times just mom and dad. And it was this beautiful childhood, but I didn't understand that they even had been scarred by cultural upbringing. They othered nature to recreation. It was their playground. And they had deep respect for it. They had a deep love for it, but they had no equality. Plus, with their Protestant belief system, they had dominion over it. So they were in charge of it. And by day 6, at first, I called it the Willamette River. It was just this recreational, beautiful blue liquid that was going to take me 187 miles. And by day 2 or 3, when I got in this dance with it, I started developing a relationship with it, and I started calling it Big Blue. But by day 6, I had just one of the most poignant, interesting experiences of my life where we were people that don't know rivers, don't know how squiggly they are,
Yeah,
don't know
they're
that
not
there
straight
are
line.
very few straight lines in nature, but especially not in rivers. And yet we had this one corridor of about a mile long that was just very straight. It was lined by 100-foot Douglas fir trees on day 6. And so I'm swimming this thing and enjoying and a little overwhelmed because I couldn't see the end of this. Always before, I would just tell myself, just make it to the next bend and let's see what's around there. Well, I couldn't see the next bend. And so I'm swimming and I'm swimming and I'm swimming. And all of a sudden, Dad stops me because he was my kayaker or guide boater. If people aren't familiar with river swimming, you always need a guide boater or a kayaker in front of you because you can see about 400 or 500 yards in front of you when you're down in the water, and you can see about 10 yards in front of you, but danger is always somewhere in between. So you need a guide boater in front of you picking the line, warning you if danger's coming, if there are any boaters, and we didn't see any boaters at all because it's such a wild river until about the last 30 or 40 miles when you're getting close to Portland. But luckily enough, fantastically enough, and this is where I just need to take a bit of a segue and tell people one of the things I learned by this is if you have the courage to follow your dreams, and Nasha's dreams aren't Dean's dreams. And no one's, I believe we all come into this world with a dream, like an instinct inside a goose to fly south for the winter. And none of our dreams are exactly the same. And I've worked on this with hundreds of clients, and so it's experientially been verified. But if you have the courage to follow that dream, then at about the 11th hour, the universe or life or whatever you want to call it starts handing you gifts. And one of the gifts for me was I had 6 guide boaters lined up. Only a month or so beforehand, 4 out of the 6 dropped out.
Wow.
And my dad was helping me plan this by stages. And he volunteered to not only take their place, but do the whole 187 miles. And so my dad and I, and he was 79 at the time. And I think you heard this story in Phoenix, but it's so fun. I called him up. I said, Dad, what are you talking about? You're going to do the whole 187 miles. You're 79. He's like, doesn't matter. I said, Dad, you've never been in a kayak. I'll learn. I'm like, okay. So he did, and we did. And now he's 91 and he's suffering terribly. He's really losing his awareness to dementia, and it's very fast acting. I think it's not dementia as much as it is delirium because he's on now 25 medications, and many of them 3 or 4 pills of each. So it's about 100 pills a day. It's just tragic to watch, but I got this beautiful time with him. And it was 22 days of just real harmony and real healing for both of us. And he stopped me and he says, hey, you got to look at this. And I looked above me and there was a male female pair of eagles circling me. And that's very rare. And ancient indigenous, many of the indigenous peoples, different tribes had all sorts of mythic ideas about what that means. Most of them, it means something about your destiny. And so I was pretty excited about it. And in his typical fashion, he's like, yeah, that's a bunch of crap, Dean. They're probably just smelling a big, ugly fish and they're sizing you up, see if they can eat you. And so we had a good laugh. And I kept swimming. Only about 15 minutes after that, I was getting hypothermia, so we stopped. And when we did, they roosted in a tree real close to us. And I thought, well, that's interesting because I'd never seen that happen. Usually they're fairly skittish. And especially in these places where they don't see many people. And then when I got in, they took off, started doing that again.
Wow.
And then when I stopped, they stopped. This interesting dance between not only me and the river, but now me and this eagle couple happened and continued to happen for the rest of the swim that day, which was 3.5 hours. And a news team met me there and wanted to interview me. And they even circled all of us as they were interviewing. The newscaster
Wow.
said, "Boy, that's strange." And they captured it on film. And then as soon as the interview was over, they took off. And I get chills now even
I'm sure
talking
you're
about it.
covered in goosebumps. Yeah.
Something deep and deeply spiritual, even though I wasn't raised this way, and I certainly was trained to think clinically, not new agey at all, but something deeply shifted in me that day. And I quit calling the Willamette Big Blue and I started calling it Mama River. And what had changed was the way I look at life. I, instead of being in charge or even better than, became equal to. And now I see everything in the living world as an equal being. And I believe what really shifted for me that day was not only that equality, that sense of equality and connectedness, but a sense that when I felt that connection, everything shifted here and here. And I broke through the cultural brainwashing that I believe we all have in this postmodern society, where at best, if we even notice, nature is scenery, and that's it. And that's why I love, as I'm just devouring your book and reading it and rereading it and thinking, oh my gosh, this woman is brilliant, and thank God for her. Uh, you are saying biologically, but even psychologically and emotionally, what I experienced psychologically and spiritually, that it's all about the terrain and tending that terrain. And we don't even, we act as if we have no terrain. I've been telling everybody lately, when it comes to us and nature, this living world, it's almost like our bodies now feel like they're floating in space,
Wow.
because we're about 3 or 4 generations at the least disconnected from any kind of harmonious connection with nature. Yeah. So
This
it's
is
that deep
cool.
connection
Yeah.
with the river first, with Mama River first,
Mm.
and then the rest of the world later, that totally changed everything for me. And I think was at the root of my radical remission. And I
Mm.
couldn't believe it that Kelly A. Turner wrote your intro
Intro.
or forward. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I found her on Instagram and I saw her in that documentary Heal,
All right.
and it brought Bobby and I didn't see her till 2018. And it
Oh,
brought Bobby and I to tears. I call her my new wife. We'll have been married 10 years now.
she's
But
talking
it shows you how old I'm getting. Uh, I like to call her my girlfriend because
Nah,
that's the way I treat her. But
cute.
brought us both to tears because at that time, she hadn't written the new book, Radical Hope,
Nope.
and
Yeah.
it was still the 9 things she found that most of us who experience radical remission do. And I intuitively had done all 9. I like to think she hasn't given me credit yet, but I like to think I was part of the motivation for her adding a 10th strategy, which
Yes.
is exercise. Yeah.
Yes. Well, we'll just park that flag. We'll
Yeah.
claim that.
Come on,
Have
Kelly.
you two talked about that by chance? Because she is so approachable and so delightful.
Yeah.
Have you two met and worked together since?
No, I've invited her several times. She has invited me secondhand. I know all the radical remission
Yeah.
folks.
True.
They invited me to become a certified radical remission coach myself. And so I took them up on their offer.
Yes.
And I'm still a little hurt that I haven't talked to her personally. And the powers that be in the radical remission movement, the two wonderful ladies that run it now, they were shocked. They're like, "Well, the way she talks about you, I thought she knew you well." I'm
Um,
like,
it's
"Not
like a
yet."
similar thing how you and I were. It's like I felt like I knew you before I met you and you
Right,
me. And
right,
that will be the same. You're going to have the same experience, I'm sure, when that moment finally comes. So it's very, very powerful. So
right.
I love that piece that you suddenly saw yourself through the pages of her book and the words, the
Yeah,
visuals of her documentary. Here it is. You just spoke to this recovering and ancient basically forgotten knowing that we are nature, that we are an extension of nature and the capacity of nature to be a healing agent, and that we're not meant to do this indoors nor alone. So, as someone who has spent 30 some years now as a therapist in an office,
under
and
fluorescent lights the
right,
first
right,
10
right.
years.
Right, exactly. Like as somebody who spent all those years and now then also experienced the world through nature and wild water and green, forests. What have the rivers and the forests taught you that 33 years at a therapy office could not? And talk to us about the framework and the process that it has like birthed from this evolution of your thinking and your training.
Yeah. Well, this, firstly, it's that, and this is going to sound so pseudo spiritual, so forgive me, but I really believe it with my whole heart that nature, we see it because we've become so separated from it as cruel and uncaring. Yellowstone, I love this series, but they all the time talk about how cruel and uncaring nature is. And so, and I, growing up, there were times I was on a cliff edge and it was 1,300 feet straight down, and I was 9 years old and a bit terrified. And I could see how people would think that way. And when things happen, things happen. But my experience of it has, as an adult, and how it helped me to recover has been very different. I've seen it as extremely loving. And I think the force that goes through nature that really activates the mitochondria is the power of love.
Oof.
Um, yeah. And I think that's what science is going to conclude next. Yeah. So
Mm.
for me, I think the thing it's taught me as a clinician is it makes me kind of want to punch Descartes in the face. I think, therefore I am.
Yeah.
It started the Western mindset down a path that has gotten so inflated. Well,
Yeah.
now, since the 80s, starting to come back to mind body, but I still don't think until maybe the last year or two, we've synthesized that enough. That's why, as I've been devouring your book, I'm like, wow, Nasha was thinking this and she was publishing this, 11 years ago. She must have been thinking about it so much even before that. You were just so ahead of your time. And
Oh, your
and that gives me deep
mortality does
respect
that.
for you.
Oh, sweetheart. Well,
Yeah.
don't you think your mortality gives you a portal that perhaps does, you know, uh, push you ahead of
Right.
maybe where our education falls off or our community falls short? I mean, you speak to that. I had a similar experience to you through a different, pathway, if you will, on
Right.
my own healing and my own experience that I too had this understanding. I mean, I grew up in a farming like family in Kansas, and we never talked about nature as something like, I mean, just exactly as you said, it was something that we sort of like, we will completely, um extract from it. That's what we're here to do. And this experience in my own body taught me that it is so circular in nature. And so the dance that you spoke to in the river, that is what I've really learned and walked with for 35 years. And
Wow.
so I love that your story and reading in your book, it makes you weep when someone gets to see this, because
Yeah.
I believe it's the truth. And I believe that when people step into that truth, it transforms them. Tend the Terrain is brought to you by DHA Laboratories, my exclusive lab partner. And the reason I can keep saying the 5 words I've built a career on: test, assess, address, don't guess. DHA is a family-owned, CLIA-licensed lab that puts it all under one roof. Standard blood work to do the deep functional and specialty work, thousands of tests with none of the runaround. A real lab run by real people who pick up the phone. And because they're thrown in with my listeners, there's special access and pricing built just for us. Come through my link at drnasha.com/DHA.
I've seen it time and time again in the last 12 years since I had my radical remission and this breakthrough. It's radically changed the way I do therapy. And at first, I did it quietly and sometimes even apologetically. And many times I would wait until about the 10th or 12th session to where they really knew me and didn't think I was some kind of crazy West Coast hippie. Um, but yeah, yeah.
Wow.
I want to just take a quick aside though
Oh,
for
let's
your
hear it.
listeners about the circular nature of life and
Mhm.
let them know that we probably rubbed shoulders or elbows or had face-to-face encounters in Wichita, Kansas in the late or
Right.
the early 90s, late 80s when you
Middle of
were
the street.
working at the corn dog place
Hot dog
and
on
I
it,
was
my
still,
friends.
yeah, and it was my favorite place to go as I was getting my graduate degree at Friends University in Wichita, Kansas. I'd run over to Town East and probably be served by Nasha. Uh,
I was making the lemonade, my friend. Keeping the
I was
biceps
just,
strong.
as I was driving home from the beach yesterday, I thought, oh man, there are many times I'd like to go back in time, but how I would absolutely adore going back to that 1990 or so and saying, hey, Nasha, it's going to be all right. You are
Oh.
going to do incredible things. You're going to write stuff and teach the world new ways. You're not always going to be working a dog on a stick.
I could so hug you for that. I would have loved to have your future self have that conversation with me back in the day, because I promise you, back in that day, maybe it was all the corn oil or what have you. I
Yeah,
was not thinking that there was a brighter, lighter future ahead of me.
right, right. How could you?
Amazing.
Yeah,
Amazing. Well, and you have developed because of your, I mean, first of all, what a hilarious story. When we were talking about that at Dr. Tom Seeger's event, we
yeah,
about fell over. Like, first of all, barely, it seems like someone all has a relative in Kansas, it seems, that the fact that we
yeah,
were in
yeah.
the same part of it at the similar time, and the fact that you knew townies, the fact that you knew hot dog on a stick. Hilarious.
Love
There are
hot
photo
dog on a
evidence.
stick, sadly. And
You,
as
everyone. I mean, it's like a bygone era, before we actually started questioning what we were actually ingesting at that point. But it was probably
yeah,
back then,
as I
probably
was
better
going through
quality.
the Terrain 10 last night, I thought hot dog on a stick probably not gonna
Not
make
going
the
to make the
list
cut.
here.
Not going to make the cut. That is hilarious. Talk to us about I mean, here's the therapist, you guys, listening to Dean. Like, can you imagine sitting not on a couch in a dark, like a closed off, walled space, like having a talk with a therapist in nature? Talk about this
Hmm.
bio wild framework and process that has evolved your practice and your thinking and how you show
Yeah,
up for those that you serve.
yeah, I am really excited to talk about it. I've been working on it for 5 years. Really, I'm now writing a book that I hope to get published sometime next year called The Wild Return.
Oh,
It's what happened after the swim and how my life and my work has really transformed. And my daughter's been poking me with the stick, as has Tom and others, to put a lot of my case examples in it. And one of the things I realized is I've always kind of nudged intuitively toward that.
wow.
I put in interesting time that I had with a horse ranch lady, and I had encouraged her to just, I asked her when had she been happy, and she couldn't remember. And then she remembered when she was 11 or 12, for 2 or 3 years, she had a wonderful horse who was her best friend, and she'd go out and ride it. Her dad had 800 acres, and she just felt free. And so I told her to go ride her horse because they were raising cutting horses and thoroughbreds. And so they had like 40 or 50 horses. And I was shocked when she said she didn't have a horse
Wow.
because her husband had basically required that she got rid of it 10 years earlier. She'd been in a 30-year miserable marriage to a not very nice person. And all she'd ever wanted to be was a horse trainer.
Wow.
And he told her she wasn't good enough with horses to be a horse trainer. So anyway, I pushed her to buy a new horse. They went to a horse auction, and because they were who they were, they bought accidentally a finicky, jumpy, mean horse. And she tried to work with this horse for a month or two, and she one day was about 2 or 3 miles from home, and it bucked her off, wouldn't let her grab the reins. She was cut, bleeding, dusty on a hot Kansas day, and finally got the reins and just was yanking it all the way back 2 or 3 miles to the corral. And finally, she'd had enough. She said, I don't even like you. You're an awful horse, called it a bunch of names. And then she realized she was no longer talking to the horse, she was talking to her husband. And so she got back and walked in, and her husband was like, "Where the hell have you been?" And she said, "Well, it bucked me off." And he's like, "See, that's what I told you. That's why I won't let you be a horse trainer." And she's like, "You know what? You can't let me do anything or not let me do anything." She said, "I tell you what, I'm getting rid of the horse." And he's like, "Well, it's about time." And she said, "You haven't let me finish. I'm getting rid of you too."
Yeah.
And and that's a real good example of how nature steps in and is therapist. I couldn't tell her ethically to divorce her husband. I'd been working with her for a year and a half. I'd edged toward that and questioned her marriage and tried to encourage her to set boundaries and let herself and her opinion be known and find her voice. But then she spends just an hour with a cantankerous horse out in nature, and she found her voice and found all of that. And I wasn't even around.
I
I
love
wasn't even there.
I
And
love
so it's those little seeds that I had. But then with this wonderful experience that I had with the river, and then later, a lot of people don't know this. We thought I had leukemia and lymphoma. Once the leukemia went away, me and my world-class oncologist thought that the lymphoma would go away. It just dried and go away. Instead, it got very aggressive. Once again, they wanted to do chemo and radiation. I didn't want to. I would have, but I asked my oncologist, okay, set the number that is kind of the no-fly zone that I have to. And we
wow.
did. I was only about 19 points away from it.
Oof.
But he said, okay, I said, give me 6 months, see if I can find some. Nature healed me once. I think it can heal me again. He's like, oh, okay. And he required that I go at first, for the first 2 months, I had to take blood tests every week.
Wow.
And then my numbers started going in the right direction. So it was every 2 weeks. What I found was Dr. King Lee's work from Nippon University in Japan on forest bathing, and how he'd done even research with men who had cancer And he found that 1 hour of forest bathing would boost their immune system by 50 to 200 times for 2 weeks. And I thought,
Amazing.
okay, I'm no Steve, but shout out to Steve. Love the guy. Um, but anyway, even though I'm not a Steve, I can figure that if it boosts it for 2 weeks and I go out weekly, and if it's an hour and I go out for 24, maybe this thing would snowball and start to become exponential. And so I started going out one full 24-hour set in May of 2015. And by March of 2016, my lymphoma was gone. But even more than that, for biowild psychology, I had always loved nature, been out in it with my parents, treated it as recreation, but now I was entering the forest a very different person. I was listening to it like had listened to the river. I was treating it as an equal being. I was embracing it. I was entering with respect, like I'm walking into their house, not just barging in like I own the place. If there's anything that still disappoints me, even can upset me, is if I'm walking along a trail and people are on their phone or have their headphones on. I'm like, you're not even here. What do you do? Go walk an urban pathway. That's what you're walking. It's like somebody walking through your house with their phone. It just. But
Amazing.
the most poignant experience that was life changing for me is the first night. We were now 5 years since my first wife died, 15 days for our 30th anniversary. And it was just devastating. And I had cried myself to sleep many nights, most nights actually, even 5 years later. But I'd never woken up crying. And that first night in the forest, about 3 hours after I'd fallen asleep, there in my backpacking hammock between two gigantic cedars, I just woke up just gutturally sobbing. And I thought, well, this is strange. I wonder if this is going to be a deal now. But I was off the trail where no one could hear me. It was just me in the trees. I thought, I'm going to let this, I'm not going to lose my man card if I let my body do what it was designed to do. So I did. I just let it pour out. And it was almost like I was throwing up emotion. It was that visceral. And it lasted about 30 or 40 minutes. It was agonizing and exhausting. But then when I was done, there was almost like an atmospheric or hydrostatic pressure from the trees that we now know is scientifically verifiable. I just felt like they were moving in and hugging, as silly as that sounds. And even at the time I blurted out, because I'm a blurter, I blurted out, well, this is weird. This is strange that I would think that the trees are hugging me. But it was like they were just holding out their branches and giving me something. And I fell into the deepest sleep I'd had since she died. I woke up pretty happy and soothed. And I wondered if this was going to start happening. I went back to my duplex, never happened. Every time I slept in the forest
Wow.
for the first year and a half, I knew that within an hour or two, I'd wake up just sobbing. Yeah. And so I knew the river had participated and had been my partner in healing. But then it wasn't just the river, it was all of nature, all of the living world. And that's when I really started becoming very serious about starting to test and implement more ecotherapy. But ecotherapy, even at its fundamentals, what separates it from biowild psychology is they see it as an addendum or an assistance to therapy. Biowild psychology sees it as a biological and psychological necessity for happiness, health, wellness, and resilience. And there's a fundamental difference there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. And wow. Oh my gosh, my friend. Like, I don't even know if we can top what you just stated there and your experience with this. First of all, I love the concept that we always say that we're tree huggers, but really we're hugged by trees. I think that's just so elegant. Dean, where can people like learn more about you? Tell them of your programs, tell them of your books, tell us when to expect in this next iteration coming in 2027 or
Sure.
beyond.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a lot of fun things going on. I'm doing a lot more speaking all the time, meeting people like you, getting to rub shoulders. It's been fun meeting people on Instagram, but again, there's just nothing like being in someone's presence and getting a real feel, a human experience of who they truly are. And that's why Phoenix was fun for a variety of reasons. But after about a week or two, Bobby's like, okay, enough about Nasha and Steve, please. Let's talk about something or someone else. And I said, but I've got more to say, Bobby. I got more to say. And so I'm getting to do that, but I still coach online
Yeah,
remotely with people around the world.
beautiful.
And one of the things that didn't surprise me, but I adore about your book, The Metabolic Approach to Cancer, is that you emphasize and re-emphasize several times in it, one size doesn't fit all. And as I've been helping cancer patients and chronic illness patients, they treat holistic medicine
Hmm.
with a Western mindset and a Western approach. I had one doctor that had breast cancer. She was on 133 supplements. And she had a doctor in Texas, one in Mexico, and one in Germany.
Darn it.
And I'm
No.
like, okay, fire two of your doctors. Feel free to fire me and pare your supplements down by 90%.
Woo,
And
yeah.
and she just was like, "Oh my gosh, no, I don't think I can do that." And I kept trying and I wasn't successful sadly with her.
Sorry to hear.
Tried to get her to quit doing what I call chasing the cure.
Oh,
She was so desperate to be cancer free that she was constantly in fight or flight.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or freeze at times, but that's no way to live. And
No.
so
Well,
I'm still seeing folks remotely around the world, and mostly what I do is experiment with them with mostly things from your book. In the last month, I've made that required reading from anybody I'm working with because it's so well organized and it's there and it's in print and they can digest it and it's been giving a real organization to my work. So I want to thank you for that.
oh, Dean.
But we pick and pull and play until we find their way.
Yes.
And what I found, and I found this in therapy as well, way before I was disconnected to Earth and the elements, is once we find something that works well for you, it's going to just always work for you. Uh, it might change a bit, but it's kind of like ever since I was in kindergarten, my favorite color has been aquamarine or teal. It
Wow.
still is,
Wow.
still is. A person's favorites really don't change, and their favorite strategies that fit their personality really don't either. And so I do that. Then what's been fun is people are hiring me to do personal adventures. And what I've started doing is giving buy one, get three free. And because I'm not inexpensive, and so a lot of times people don't want to just plop a big
Yeah.
bunch of money for 4 or 6 day personal retreat.
Yeah.
And sometimes one on one, if you haven't met a person in person, it feels a little threatening. And so I've been telling, and especially with women, I'm not going to walk out into a forest in Oregon alone with a woman I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I either take Bobby if they can't find anyone, or many times what they'll do is they'll bring one beautiful, trusted friend who also wants to work on their issues, or up to three. So groups of four, and that's really fun. I've started doing some workshops. I'm going to do another one based on biowild psychology,
Cool.
the four pillars of biowild psychology, starting September 8th.
Amazing.
And yeah, doing a lot more speaking. So hoping to put some more courses out there and continue to build that brand.
Wow.
Within a year, and I had people, I went and spoke in Minnesota to a bunch of pro hockey players.
Oh,
Yeah, because of Harvey Martin, he invited me
oh,
up
very
there
cool.
and met a lot of people, and there were several that who were there to speak and add to the event as well. And they got excited about biowild psychology. And so I'm thinking about starting a certification, how to become a biowild practitioner sometime in this next year. But for 2 years, I've been getting ready to publish a book called Nervous System First Aid. I
Wow.
was going to publish it before you ever saw anything about nervous system. Now everybody's talking about it. And it's called Nervous System First Aid Essential Tools for Fast Relief and Lasting Calm.
Wow.
But it's basically a first aid kit for those who want strategies that have worked in real time with real people. A lot of them, there are over 60 of them in this book. I put the index at the first. That's one of the major changes so that it's like a first aid kit. When you go to the first aid kit, the instructions are first and what's in the kit. And so when a person's dysregulated, they can do an A to Z index, like say they're feeling dread. They can go to the D for dread and find the strategies and they can try those. And most of these, a lot of these are ancient and maybe people haven't heard, or they're Dean Hall's crazy strategies that he's tried out first on friends and then on hundreds of clients and seen work.
Very
And
cool.
most of them are nature based or movement oriented. There, very few of them are simply cognitive. Yeah, I can't
Amazing.
really think of any really that are just simply cognitive. Yeah.
Holy cow, you are definitely a busy man. Nothing is slowing you down. You still have
No.
this as
Yeah.
your passion, as your purpose.
Very much
And
so.
so I love to ask folks here, what are you in our final moments? What
Sure.
are you currently tending in your own terrain these days?
Yeah. Uh, a lot. I still think I can do everything. You know, I'm so ADHD, I can focus like no other. And it used to drive my parents crazy, but give me 3 or 4 hours sleep, I'm good to go.
Yeah.
And so from the time I was 15 to the time I was 42, I had two jobs, sometimes three. And during that time, put myself through 3 degrees. Uh, and I promised when my first wife died, I wouldn't live like that anymore. But I've gotten so excited about all this stuff, I have a tendency to overdo. And so, as I've been reading your book, one of my terrains that I'm not tending quite well enough, even though I swim almost every day out in rivers, and I take every Friday and spend all day Friday and have for the last 10 years out in the wilderness. I do some really good self care, but I don't, even though I can say no, I don't want to. And so,
Yeah.
and part of it is this little, because as you know, if anybody does, that deep awareness that our time is very limited here on earth. I feel like I've been given this gift of understanding how deeply connected we are, and I want everybody to know it, but then I want them to know it as deeply as I know it. And I don't want this awareness or some of these insights to die with me, as egotistical as that sounds. Um, I don't feel
Yeah.
it as ego, but it's not that I'm so smart or know so much. I've been given it. And so I want everyone to have the gift of knowing what I know and being able to live like I live. So I need to pare down my schedule a little bit, and Bobby and I've been talking about that lately. And then because I've been busier, I haven't taken enough time to I don't call it yoga, I call it baby stretching. Because Bobby's a yogi, or at least used to be a yoga instructor. She wouldn't call herself a yogi anymore, but I've tried to do yoga with Bobby, and we both agreed I do baby stretches. Um, yeah, it can't be even close to anything called yoga,
That
but
is
that keeps
perfect.
me as I age, it keeps me more limber and more mobile, especially
Amazing.
since I'm swimming and working out so much at 66. It's easy to get stoved up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I've had more inflammation. Yeah.
Amazing. You are such an inspiration. You give me goals. You're giving me goalposts of what I want to be, 10, 11 years from now. That
Wow.
it just gets better and better and better. You're showing us that you can kind of be a Benjamin Button and anti-age where I'm the
From
age
the
now.
neck down, I am.
Stop
From the neck up, it's like, ooh, yeah, no.
it,
66.
Dean. Do you realize that I am the same age you were when you swam that river?
Wow. Yeah.
And to hear
Crazy.
that, it's just so fascinating. Like we can always like just fully live in this body
We
of
can.
ours. It's such a much more profound and grateful and powerful way. I just love that what you share and what you've learned along the way, that you are sharing it forward with so many others. So it is your legacy, my friend. It is not ego.
Mm,
It's what the world
yeah.
needs. And so I'm
Yeah.
grateful to have been following you all of these years and your remarkable story, your remarkable life. I'm grateful for meeting you in person and knowing that who you are online does no justice to who the amount of beauty and energy you exude in person.
Oh,
And
thank you.
and I look forward to what is coming through you next, my friend. So thank
Oh,
you for
thank
being
you.
with us today. Thank you, thank you, thank
Well,
you.
thank you for having me. I've just been fangirling on you for so long, and now you and Steve, and just your podcast 491, but tops in my book. I've been looking so forward to this. As a matter of fact, I probably should tell you this.
Uh-oh.
When you invited me,
Yeah.
and I went to sign up, and it, there we were in mid-June, and it was August. I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to wait till August? And so it's kind of like I've had this creepy advent calendar, one day closer. So I just can't tell you how much I admire you, your work, how you show up in the world.
Thank you.
And I think people ought to know how beautiful and beautifully matched, and how much you and Steve honor each other. Because to me, that tells so much about your character and your heart and your ability to show up and be real. To have, I mean, how long have you guys been together?
My
Like a
God.
100 years?
Yeah, between the two of us, almost
Yeah.
25 years married, 35
Yeah.
years September together. And
Yeah.
it's not like it's been easy. We've had our moments.
Right.
We've had even most
Right.
recently some moments, but we came through it together even stronger than ever. We've always been insanely compatible. Like that has
Yeah.
never gone away, but our own growth within us, you as a couples therapist knows, we both were willing to continue to put in the work and to grow
Yeah.
together. Yeah. Thank you
And
for that reflection.
for a lifelong people watcher, a trained people watcher, that was so visible and
Oh,
beautiful and apparent. And to me, it just validated and underscored all the work that you've done. It was like, yeah, this is a beautiful, wise human being that is practicing those things in her life. And I don't know about you, but I've been disappointed so many times with these people I kind of fangirled over, and then I met them, and they were nothing like they were
There was
or
an
said they were.
inconsistency or an
Yeah,
incongruence.
yeah.
I've felt that too with people I've met, and that's why I think it's so mutual. It's so beautiful. I'm super honored that you're
Thank you.
being so gracious towards me during this conversation when it was supposed to be all about you, Dean. So,
Yeah,
but I love it.
that's never gonna work. No.
Well, I would love to have you on when this next book comes out. Let's do
Okay.
this again.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, I'd love
yes.
to. It should Bree and I are going to publish it here in the next month. So
Gosh,
sometime
that's
after.
crazy. Congratulations.
Oh,
Looking
thanks.
very much forward to it. And my dear, keep shining your beautiful, beautiful, beautiful light in this world.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you. All right.
What stays with me about Dean is the order of things. We want the story to go, man gets cancer, man fights cancer, man beats cancer. But that's not how he tells it. He tells it as a man who was drowning in grief, who found one cold, wild, impossible thing worth living for, and gave himself to it completely. And somewhere in those 22 days and 187 miles, his body, given entirely different conditions to live in, did something no one could have written a prescription for. He won't call it a cure, and neither will I. What he'll call it is that it's proof that we are not as finished as our diagnoses make us feel, and that the water, the cold, the wildness, the reason to go on, these were never just backdrop. They were the medicine. You don't have to swim a river, but maybe there's a place in your life you've been trying to fix from inside four walls, when what it's actually asking for is weather and movement and something larger than yourself to point toward. Thanks for tending the terrain with me today. Whatever stirred in you, don't rush past it. Let it compost, because when we tend the terrain, life knows what to do. See you in our next conversation.